All right, guys, I'm back previewing divisions today. Previewing today the NFC East. Of course, this division contains the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Commanders, and the New York Giants. So I'm previewing and predicting the record for all four of these teams. And make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more NFL content. I hope you guys enjoy this video. And leave in the comments below, who do you think wins the NFC East in 2022? Give me your division preview for this season and your predictions for the division. And without further ado, let's get right into my predictions. All right, so let's start with the team that I think most people have finishing last in this division, and that's the New York Giants. And I can totally see that, but I've actually kind of rethought the Giants recently, and I've gotten a more positive outlook on this team this year. So I look at this team. They bring in Brian Dable, who I really like as a head coach. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind, an offensive schemer, and I think he was big with the development of Josh Allen. He's also a guy that has won championships with Alabama in the past, with the Patriots in the past. He's a proven winner and just overall offensive mind, offensive guru, quarterback guru. So I'm a big fan of that move at head coach. They also bring in Don Martindale, another defensive coordinator that if you know me, you know I love. I think he's one of the best, if not the best in the game at that right now. Daniel Jones is the big key to this team. I think Saquon Barkley, if he's able to stay on the field, is going to be a game changer. It's going to be a difference maker. It's going to take over the year. He can realistically be a top 5 running back. He has all the talent to do so, and we've seen that in the past. But he just has to put it together. He has to stay healthy. He has to get the proper amount of blocking support as well. And they have improved their offensive line with Glowinski in free agency. Andrew Thomas being there at left tackle, along with Evan Neal, who they added at right tackle, who I thought was the best player at the draft. I thought Evan Neal was amazing last season for Alabama with an offensive line that really wasn't very good outside of him. He really elevated it, and I just think he's the best player in the draft. The receiver position is interesting. You look at Kenny Golladay as a player that has potential, but has been very disappointing so far in the last couple years and practices, has not been able to stay on the field very much either. Kadarius Toney, though, has a ton of potential. Sterling Shepard is solid, and Wan'Dale Robinson, as a rookie, has potential as well. So, I mean, the Giants at weapon have talent. Now, the Bellinger guy at tight end, Daniel Bellinger, I'm not sure how much he possesses, but the receiver position's fairly deep and fairly solid. Even Darius Slayton can play. Saquon Barkley is, when he's on the field, really good, and Matt Breida is also there as a backup who's solid. It comes down to Daniel Jones. If Daniel Jones makes some strides this year, if he's comfortable with Brian Dable, if they develop a good relationship and he's able to play much more mature and consistent football, then I think this offense could be better than the 23 ranking I have it at right now. Defensively, I think the Giants are actually pretty decent. Their interior defensive line is stacked. When you look at Lawrence and Williams, that's a great defensive line. They had Thibodeau at edge. But other than that, I mean, it's not actually that great of a defense, I'd say. They do have Adoree Jackson at corner, who I love, but the linebacker core can still be taken advantage of, I think. The safety core is solid, but not great. And outside of Adoree Jackson, I do also think the corner core is a bit questionable, let's say. But I look at this team. They have Wink Martindale, who, again, an awesome defensive coordinator that's going to elevate everybody. So I think the defense actually comes in at 18. I think it could be better than people think. I look at the Giants this year, and I have them, if we can get to the record prediction, I have them at 7-10. And if you can just see, if you can scroll back a bit, I had them finishing third in the NFC East. That is because I've dropped on one team, but I really think the Giants have potential to be better than what people think this year. I really feel that way. I think the Giants are a team that could be better. Now, if we look at the ceiling, I think it's 9-8. I think this is if Daniel Jones takes a huge step up. I think this is if Brian Dable really finds this offense's groove. And if Wink Martindale seriously augments this defense and makes them a very good unit. And if you look at the other side of the coin here, the floor that I have at 4-13, this is if Daniel Jones just isn't the guy. If the defense disappoints, if Saquon gets hurt again, that's what I think the worst case is for this team. The over under is 7.5. I'd take the under, but I mean, if you took the over, I wouldn't hate it. They don't have a particularly tough schedule, which also helps them. So I think the Giants, don't sleep on the Giants. They could be better than you think, but overall for the season, I'm going to go with 7-10. Let's move on to the next team, the team in this division that is changing starting quarterbacks from last season. That is the Washington Commanders and Carson Wentz. Kind of a weird offseason for Washington. They bring in Carson Wentz. They draft Jahan Dotson, a wide receiver from Penn State. Make a couple defensive ads in the draft. I like the Fidadrian Mathis pick. They also lost a couple players on their defensive line, but overall, pretty similar look to the Washington team this year than last year, minus obviously Carson Wentz, who is now on the team. How do I expect Washington to do this year? I think offensively, you're going to look at a team that has a decent scheme. I do like Scott Turner quite a bit. But from what I've seen and from what I'm hearing about Carson Wentz, he has been awful in camp in the preseason. And I'm not going to take too much stock into that, again, because it's not that big of a deal. We go off what we see in the regular season as the biggest indication from last season is the biggest indication of what they'll be most likely. But I don't know with Carson Wentz how good he's going to be. He's a very volatile and inconsistent quarterback, and he's almost worse with time, right? Because he loves to scramble rounds and try to extend and make plays. But Washington's offensive line, which I actually think is pretty decent, is gonna allow him time to sit there and pick apart and read a defense and make smart decisions. And I don't actually know if he's great at that. He had a very good offensive line with the Colts last year and wasn't able to have a ton of success. He had pretty good statistics, but it came in bunches, and it overall, I think, hid a lot of the flaws that was in his game last year. The receiving core, I like McLaurin a lot. I like Jahan Dotson, who they drafted. Curtis Samuel's fine as a slot guy. Logan Thomas comes back at tight ends. That'll certainly help them offensively. Gibson, McKissick, and Brian Robinson are all interesting at running back. I think that's a pretty decent three-headed trio there. I like that. I like that running back trio. The offensive line, as I said, is pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. So the offense is actually not that bad. I think the offense has some potential. But the problem for the offense is I think they'll be inconsistent, and I don't see a ton of elite talent without Brandon Scherf on that offensive line, or just really on the offense in general outside of Terry McLaurin. And defensively, which has been a strength for this team in years past, and last year pass rush was a huge strength. They were pretty good in run defense. They were terrible in pass defense, especially at the beginning of the year. It seems like every quarterback and offense was having their best day passing against Washington because their secondary was a massive liability. Now, I expect their secondary to be better this year. I don't think they can be that bad again. I just think they're a little too talented for that. Kendall Fuller and William Jackson are still solid above average to average NFL corners. Curl and McCain aren't bad at safety either. St. Juste is a poor nickelback, but they have drafted a couple guys at corner to help with some depth there. I think they'll be a little better, but the front seven is weaker. Their linebacker core isn't that great. Their defensive line in the interior is amazing, but the edge rush, we'll see. Chase Young has been a little disappointing, quite honestly. Montez Sweat's been pretty good, but not great. They've lost depth in that position as well. So I just don't expect the defense to be quite as good as it's been in years past. And that's ultimately why I'm lower on them. I have Washington actually finishing last in this division. I think it's partly because the Giants have a slightly easier schedule. But overall, I just see a little more upside with the Giants, and I'm kind of buying into that a little bit more with them. I look at Washington. I think they're a 7-10 football team. I think their ceiling's probably 10-7. If Carson Wentz is better than I think he is, and this offense has some real success, and this defense is back to close to 2020 form, then I think they can win 10 games and maybe make the playoffs. I think the floor is 5-12. If the defense, as I think, is going to significantly regress and the offense is worse than I think, then I think that's probably what happens. The over/under is 7.5. I really think this team is a 7 or 8 win team. So it's essentially, do you think they'll win 7 or do you think they'll win 8 as to whether you're on the over or under side? I'm going to take the under just because I've got them winning 7 games. So that is my preview for the Washington Commanders for the 2020. All right, let's get to the team that I think is going to win the NFC East this year. That's the Philadelphia Eagles. And guys, this Philadelphia Eagles team, I was already really high on them, and they now have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a guy who I thought was a borderline, like, I thought he was a top 25-ish level safety in the NFL. I think he's that good. They essentially swapped Jalen Reagor for him. Not in the same trade, obviously, but they got rid of Reagor, and they got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from the Saints, and that makes a stacked roster even more stacked. I look at this team as just the only thing they aren't completely proven at, I guess, offensively is really Jalen Hurts. I look at the running back room. Sanders, a very good player when he's played. Gainwell, another player that has had a lot of success last year. Even Boston Scott is a player that has been pretty solid in the past and pretty, kind of elusive, explosive, efficient on a per carry basis. Someone that I think is a little underrated. The Eagles running back room is very deep. They don't have a star, but it's very deep. And they're running behind the best offensive line in football. An offensive line that boasted an elite left tackle last season in Jordan Mailata, or Mailata, however you say it. Landon Dickerson, a good left guard. Isaac Samalu, a good right guard. The best center, one of the best centers in the NFL, and Jason Kelsey still. And Lane Johnson, still one of the best right tackles in the NFL. And absolutely awesome, the best offensive line in football. They add a receiver, A.J. Brown, one of the best receivers in football. Devontae Smith is the wide receiver too. He was, of course, a Heisman winner and someone that had a quietly pretty good rookie year last year. Expect him to be better. And in the slot, they've got Quez Watkins, who is underrated. The receiver core is very good. The tight end core, not a lot behind Dallas Goedert, but Dallas Goedert, again, is a top 6 tight end in football. So not exactly doing terribly at skill position there if you're an Eagles fan. I look at quarterback position as the question. Again, how is Jalen Hurts going to be as a passer? We know he's a good runner. We don't know what he is as a passer. I think he's actually going to be a little better this year. I think he makes a lot of big throws, sometimes struggles in the short game, and simply the game doesn't quite slow down enough for him at times. I think that's going to be better this year. He's going to have better weapons around him. The offensive line's still going to be dominant. He's going to have second full year in a system. I think he's going to be better this year for sure. And he still has an explosive ability with his legs to add to an offense, which makes their run game that was already great even better. So the offense, I think, is top 10. The defense, the only questions I have with it are linebacker and coaching, because Brandon Graham is still very good. They still have Barnett, who's a good situational pass rusher for them. They added Hassan Reddick. They have Josh Sweat, who's been pretty solid for them. Very deep set of edge players there. Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Jordan Davis in the inside. That's an amazing interior defensive line. You can't run on this team. So the defensive line's fantastic. The linebacker core, Kazir White, TJ Edwards, 2 pretty underrated players. They also drafted my boy from Georgia, Nakobe Dean, who got a GPA of 4 as a mechanical engineer. He's a pretty smart guy and is pretty fast and very good sideline to sideline. Will help this defense immensely, I think. So the front 7 stacked. The secondary is better for sure. I mean, Darius Slay came in a couple years ago. Last year was one of the better corners in the NFL. I still think he's a very good player. James Bradbury comes in. Not his best year last year, but was great the year before that. Is certainly an upper echelon number 2 corner, I think. I look at nickel. Avonte Maddox is pretty good at safety. Again, they add Gardner-Johnson, which was a great add. Marcus Epps at free safety is not awful, not amazing, but not awful. The only question really about the defense is, I guess, linebacker and maybe safety. And I don't really know what to expect from the defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon. I'm not sure how good he is. I don't think he's as good as Jim Schwartz was. So that's why I'm not quite as high on this defense as maybe the talent would suggest. But I still think this defense is going to be really good. I mean, it could be much higher than the 13th best defense in football. So the Eagles, I look at this team as a team that overachieved last year. Nobody really thought they'd make the playoffs. They were able to capitalize on the NFC being pretty weak and them having a very favorable end to their schedule. And honestly, they were really killing a lot of bad teams by the end of the year. They go to the playoffs, they play the Bucks, and they get really manhandled. I mean, the first 55 minutes or so of that game were not competitive at all. They made the score look a little prettier in the end, but they did not belong on the same field as even a hobbled Bucks team. This year, though, they come back. I think they're better offensively because they've improved their weapons. I think they're better defensively because their front and secondary are better. So I think they're coming back in a weakened division where I think we'll get to the Dallas Cowboys in a minute. I think they've significantly gotten worse from last year, and I already didn't think they were that great to start off with. I think the Eagles have significantly improved. I think they're the most improved team in this division of all of them. And they don't play that tough of a schedule. So my record prediction for the Eagles is 12-5. I recently had them 11-6. I've looked back on it. I've looked back at the schedule. I think they're going to go 12-5. I think the ceiling's 13-4. I think this is if Jalen Hurts is really, really good and everything else kind of stays the same. And on the floor, I think is 8-9. This is if Jalen Hurts isn't it. But honestly, the floor is pretty high because, again, schedule, the roster doesn't have many question marks. So even if it's a little worse than we expect, it's still not going to be, even bad. And they've got Gardner Minshew as a backup if anything goes wrong. And he's certainly shown that he can be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL throughout his career. So the floor for this team is pretty high, even without a great quarterback position. So I'm really confident in the Eagles. I think they go 12-5 this year, and I think they end up as one of the best teams in the NFC, and I think they're going to win the NFC East this season. All right, and the favorite to win the division is the team we'll preview last, the Dallas Cowboys. And as I already predicted, I think the Eagles are going to win the division. And I said the Cowboys are going to significantly regress this season, and I feel that way. And there are a multitude of reasons that I feel that way. Let's start off with who the Cowboys were last season. The Cowboys went 12-5 last year. They finished third in points and yards per drive and eighth in points per drive, sixth in yards per drive allowed, and fourth in points allowed per drive. So they were a very good, statistically very good team. I mean, they were the number one team in simple rating system in the NFL last year. They had the number one offense in scoring last year. They were a very good team statistically. But when you really look at what the Cowboys were last year, they lost to a lot of the best teams that they played. They went 6-0 against the weak NFC East. They went 6-5 out of division, and including the playoff game, they went 6-6. They looked really explosive and really dominant and efficient offensively in the first, really up through that Patriots game before Dak Prescott got hurt. And really after that, they really struggled, I felt, in a lot of games last year. And defensively, they were really bend but don't break. They got a lot of turnovers, which I think helped some of their stats. But they could be run on, they could be thrown on. So the Cowboys, I don't feel were as good as their record or stats indicate last year. And I feel that's because they played a very weak schedule. Now they play a first place schedule. That's one of the reasons I'm lower on them. I think their roster is also worse. I look at this team. Dak Prescott, a very good quarterback. Probably a top 12. He is a top 12 quarterback. Maybe a top 10 quarterback. You can make an argument. Very good player. Someone that'll elevate your team to an extent. But I don't know if Dak Prescott is a Peyton Manning, Tom Brady caliber quarterback where you're going to make the playoffs because you have Dak Prescott. I don't know about that. Ezekiel Elliott, I think, is regressing at running back. Still a starting caliber player, but is no longer the game changer he was a couple years ago. Tony Pollard, a very good backup player, borderline starting player, but is I think a little bit overrated because he is a Cowboy. I think some people have given him more credit because he's more known, I guess. And, if another backup running back were doing what he did and they played for, I don't know, the New Orleans Saints, let's just say, instead of the Dallas Cowboys, they probably wouldn't get as much credit for that. But still, running back core is fine, not great. Dalton Schultz is a very good tight end. They did add Jake Ferguson from Wisconsin, who I liked in the draft. So that's a good position for them. The offensive line is certainly weaker, though. They lose Tyron Smith for maybe the entire year, certainly the first 3 months. And that was a huge loss because, Trent Williams got all the accolades last year and all the recognition. But Tyron Smith, I thought, was probably the second best left tackle in football last season. And when he's been on the field, he has been a Hall of Fame level player. What's separating him from being a Hall of Famer has been injuries, and he suffered another one here. They're starting currently Josh Ball at left tackle, and I have no idea how good he's going to be. So that's a question mark there, especially when for a lot of the year this offensive line was very good, specifically in pass protection. Connor McGovern is a good to solid left guard. Biadaz is a solid center. Martin's obviously one of the greatest guards of all time, still maybe the best in the game today. Steele is fine, but he's not amazing. Other than Zach Martin, this offensive line is very ordinary, and it's not one of their best offensive lines at all, in my opinion. The receiving core, CeeDee Lamb's great, but you're looking at Michael Gallup coming off an injury. We don't know what he's going to be completely. Jalen Tolbert is starting. The depth on this receiving core without Cedric Wilson, without Amari Cooper, has certainly regressed. So I think the offense, coached by Kellen Moore, who is someone that has very good offensive play calling weeks, but also has some stagnant offensive play calling weeks. Really inconsistent, usually more good than bad, but somewhat inconsistent. I think the offense is still going to be a top 10 unit just because I have faith in Dak, faith in Zach Martin, faith in Kellen Moore, faith in CeeDee Lamb. I think they can be a top 10 unit, but I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, quite as good. And I think that'll hurt them because I think their defense is not going to be as lucky with turnovers this year. And overall, just from a roster perspective, their defense is pretty much the same as it was last year. Look at their edge position. DeMarcus Lawrence comes back, hopefully for the full year, which will help them. But outside of him, this edge rush is not all that deep. The interior defensive line is pretty weak. They do have Parsons and Van Der Esch at linebacker, who are Parsons, one of the best in the game. They added Anthony Barr, which was, I thought, a good signing. He may even start over Van Der Esch at some point this season. They've both been good players in the past. Haven't completely put it together as of late, but have that ability still. The secondary is solid, but it's not special. Anthony Brown is a little better than I think some Cowboys fans think, but he's not great. Trayvon Diggs is not as good as a lot of Cowboys fans think, but he's still very good. And Jordan Lewis at nickel's fine. He's a little undersized, though. Jaron Kearse is a good safety. Malik Hooker is a solid one. So the secondary is, outside of Micah Parsons, probably the strength of the defense, but, it's not amazing. Like, it's not Ravens level, Saints level, Packers level secondary, I don't think. I don't even think it's Bucs level. So I don't see them as an upper echelon level secondary in the NFL. I think they're good, but I don't think they're quite in that top 5, top 6 range. So I think the Cowboys defense is around the 20th best in football, which is where I have them right now. And I look at this team, I don't think Mike McCarthy's a very good coach, quite honestly. I think last year they played a very easy schedule, and this year they play a tough schedule. And so that's why I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are going to win the division. I have them finishing second. And that's why I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to be the first team outside as the 8th best team in the NFC. I have them at 8-9. I considered 9-8. But I found losses on this schedule that I found games on the schedule I just thought they were going to lose, and that's just how I feel about it. The ceiling's 11-6. This is if Dak leads the offense, Dak takes a step up. This offense is still very good, and if their defense does take a step up from last year and it isn't relying on turnovers, it's just a very good defense. Then that they can win 11 games. The 6-11 floor is if Dak isn't that as great and the offense kind of stagnates and Moore has an inconsistent year again and the defense doesn't improve and instead regresses and doesn't have those same game-changing turnovers, then I think it could start to unfold a little bit disastrously for the Cowboys. The over-under is 10.5. I think that's way too big. I think this should be an 8.5 over-under team, and I'm slamming the over-under. I'm slamming the under on 10.5 there. So That is your NFC East prediction. I have the Philadelphia Eagles finishing first with the third seed in the NFC at 12-5. Dallas Cowboys just missing the playoffs at 8-9. I have the New York Giants and Washington Commanders tying at 7-10 and third and fourth, but I have the Giants getting there on tiebreaker. So the Giants finished third and the Commanders finished fourth. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL content. And have a great day. God bless.